please leave?" said my mother-in-law, Catherine, coldly as soon as we learned my husband would be transferred abroad. She took the house away from me and my daughter. With nowhere else to go, I went to the park with my 2-year-old daughter, feeling lost and unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, police officers surrounded me and asked me to come to the station. Soaking wet from the rain and shivering, I followed them, only to find an unexpected person waiting for me there. My name is Emma, and I'm turning 35 this year. I met my husband Bob at work, and after a year of dating, we got married. I quit my job when we married, and 2 years ago, our daughter Lily was born. Currently, I live with Bob, Lily, and my mother-in-law, Catherine. We used to rent, but after Catherine's husband passed away and her knees started giving her trouble, we decided to buy a new apartment and live together. It made sense since it was cheaper than a house, had an elevator for Catherine's knees, and good transportation access. Bob's job requires a lot of travel, more than other employees, with trips to other states about once a week. Having a 2-year-old, I get stressed when he's away. At first, Catherine helped with childcare, but now she doesn't at all. She actually creates more work for me by leaving dirty dishes and unwashed utensils around. When I ask her to rinse them, she apologizes and promises to be careful, but it's just talk. She only rinses them when Bob is home, which I recently noticed. Catherine's behavior seems intentionally difficult. She asks if I need anything from the store and then later complains she needed something after I've already returned. Considering her bad knees, I initially wanted to help her, but my desire is fading. I thought about talking to Bob, but he's stressed from work and I didn't want to add to his burden. Catherine's behavior started soon after we moved in together, and it's been ongoing for several years. A friend suggested that Catherine might be bullying me and that I should talk to Bob. I worry that discussing it might lead to Catherine, who has no other relatives, ending up in a facility. At first, I thought enduring it was better. But one day something happened that changed my mind. I planned to drop off Lily at my parents' place. They love having her over for sleepovers. Thanks for always bringing Lily. We look forward to these visits. Why don't you stay over sometimes too? They said. I wanted to, but I was worried about leaving Catherine alone. After a brief chat, I decided to head home. I reminded myself not to spoil Lily with too many toys. When I reached the apartment, I realized I had left my keys at home. Luckily, Catherine was supposed to be inside, so I rang the intercom. No answer. Maybe she had gone out. I decided to wait outside. After 2 hours, it was dark and Catherine still hadn't returned. Finally, another resident arrived and I followed them in. Catherine rarely goes out at night, so I was sure she was home. I pressed the intercom button again. I heard the ding-dong inside, but still no response. I waited by the door and heard a faint sound from within. Catherine was definitely inside. I tried the intercom a few more times, but she didn't answer. Defeated, I stayed at a nearby motel, planning to return when Bob got back from his business trip. When Bob came back, I told him what happened. He was upset for me, but Catherine shrugged it off, claiming she hadn't heard because of her hearing. She even tried to hide a smirk. Relieved to be back inside, I grabbed my keys and went to pick up Lily from my parents' house. My parents were supportive, offering a place to stay if things got too tough. Their comforting words brought tears to my eyes, but I quickly wiped them away in front of Lily and headed home. Things were calm for a while until Bob's international transfer was finalized. It wasn't just a business trip, it was a permanent move. We had just bought a place, and now this. Bob thought it would be best for Lily and me to stay in the U.S., but could I handle living with his mom? After considering the potential stress for Lily, I agreed it was best for us to stay. Bob left for Europe soon after, and despite his concern for us, He was too busy to think much about it. So life with Catherine began. As expected, things went downhill as soon as Bob left. Catherine's attitude changed dramatically. One stormy day, she dropped a bombshell. Now that Bob's gone, wouldn't it be better if you and Lily moved out? I was shocked. Excuse me, what do you mean? Just what I said. I can't relax with strangers in the house. I'd appreciate it if you could leave right now. I couldn't believe her audacity. I had always tried to make living together comfortable and treated her as family. To her, we were just an inconvenience. I considered heading back to my parents' place, but she pushed me out the door, saying, "Why don't you just get out?" Lily and I, still dressed as we were thrown out into the rain. No matter how much I banged on the door, Catherine wouldn't come out. Lost and confused, I carried Lily to a nearby park. There was a small roof there that offered some shelter from the rain. Ideally, I would have checked into a motel or gone back to my parents' place, but I had left both my wallet and phone inside the house. Feeling helpless, I sat in the park, trying to figure out our next move. I'm not sure how much time passed in the torrential downpour. Overwhelmed by fatigue and cold, I began to doze off. It was already dark, and even though it was summer, the cold was biting. I feared we might catch a cold. As bad as things were, it seemed the only option was to walk to my parents' home, but it would be a 3-hour walk. As I was contemplating our situation, I saw 2 distant lights approaching. Given the rain, I couldn't see clearly, but the lights belonged to 2 police officers. I thought maybe they could help. Before I could approach, one of them called out, "Are you Emma, and is this little one Lily?" I was surprised they knew my name, but weakly replied, "Yes, that's us." The officer said, "Please come to the station with us." I wondered why the police station. Urged by the officer, Lily and I got into the patrol car. We were freezing from being out in the rain for so long, but the officers had thoughtfully brought large towels. "You might need these. We've got some spare clothes back at the station for you," they said kindly. Wondering why they knew about us and why we were headed to the police station, I inquired, "How did you know where to find us?" They responded, "We'll explain everything once we're back at the station. For now, just try to relax." Exhausted, I soon fell asleep and woke up to find we had arrived at the police station. Following the officers inside, to my surprise, I saw Catherine and my uncle. "Uncle, what are you doing here?" "He was contacted by Bob," he explained. "Bob suspected I might be having issues with his mom, and since he's abroad, he wanted my uncle to keep an eye on things for him." According to my uncle, Bob had spoken to him about this issue before. He said Bob had requested him to keep an eye on things since he couldn't be there himself. It turns out Bob saw us in the rain earlier today. He was considering taking us in himself, but thought Catherine's behavior was extreme, so he reported to the police. That's why the officers knew our whereabouts and came to get us. Catherine had also been asked to come to the police station. She sat on a sofa, glaring at me, seemingly clueless about why she was there. "Why do I have to be here? I have a bad knee, you know." If Bob was here, this wouldn't be happening. Catherine was making her case. But this entire situation was a result of Bob asking my uncle for help. In discussions with the police, there was a high likelihood that the events might have legal implications. I was told to consider hiring an attorney. That seemed like an overreaction. All I did was lock the door. I didn't do anything else. Do you even realize what you've done? You threw Emma and her child out in torrential rain. That's not forgivable. My uncle backed me up, saying I was the rightful owner of the house. But Catherine insisted it was impossible, claiming Bob was the rightful owner and that it should be hers now that he's not here. Catherine was under the impression Bob owned the house, but she was wrong. Actually, my uncle, who runs a real estate business, got us a great deal on a condo. Bob had suggested putting the property under my name. At the time, I didn't care, but now I'm glad I listened to him. Following my uncle's advice, I decided to hire a lawyer. The lawyer said evicting Catherine would be tough, suggesting placing her in a care facility might be the best option. I immediately called Bob to explain the situation. He hadn't expected things to escalate this much and wanted to return from Japan to discuss it properly. He was also considering placing Catherine in a facility. Despite being at the police station, Catherine casually snacked on crackers. I couldn't return home with Catherine there, so I took shelter at my parents' place until Bob returned. He would be back in a week, giving me time to figure out our next steps. If Bob wouldn't support me, divorce seemed like the only option. I regretted not seeking advice sooner. A week later, Bob returned from Europe and went to the house with Catherine, so I moved back home from my parents' place. Given the urgency, Bob could only stay for a few days. We needed to discuss our next moves. I heard some things from Emma's uncle. Is all of that true? It's all lies. I haven't done anything. Emma's plotting to evict me, Catherine stubbornly claimed. Bob, who should have been on my side, seemed to want to consider Catherine's perspective. I get it. Do you have any evidence to prove Emma's plotting something? Evidence? Of course not. Emma, do you have any evidence? To be honest, I'd been so busy with work I hadn't kept an eye on things. I'm not sure who to believe. I handed Bob a voice recorder. What's this? It contains recordings of Catherine. She not only evicted me but also berated me. When Bob played it, he heard Catherine's voice saying things like, "Such a worthless wife. I wonder why he even married you." Hearing this, Catherine quickly tried to defend herself. This is taken out of context. Everyone has their moments, right? I was just frustrated at the time, but it was just once. As Catherine claimed this, a barrage of recorded verbal abuses played from the voice recorder. There were countless instances, and even some that weren't captured on the device. Bob's hand, holding the recorder, trembled with tension and anger. Meanwhile, Catherine looked guilt-ridden. "Mom, what is this about?" Bob asked, but Catherine remained silent. "If you won't answer, then I assume this is all true. If so, I need to protect Emma and Lily. You understand that, right?" I had never seen Bob angry in all the years we'd been together. Catherine, probably seeing this side of Bob for the first time, looked frightened and shrunk back, unable to say a word. Afterward, there were several discussions until Bob's return to Europe. I asserted that I could no longer live with Catherine, considering Lily's presence and not wanting a repeat of this event. I felt I wouldn't be able to handle it. Bob seemed to share my sentiment, leaning towards placing Catherine in a care facility. However, Sean strongly opposed the idea, complicating the discussions. "Regardless, I've decided to sell the house, so you can't stay here anymore. If you don't want the facility, you'll need to find another place," I told Catherine. "How dare you decide this on your own? I won't allow you to sell the house." Catherine resisted, but it was a tough request to accommodate. That's because Lily and I had decided to move to Europe. Bob regretted not being more present for his family and wanted to be there for us moving forward. Although I was hesitant about living abroad, knowing Bob would be with us reassured me. Besides, Lily is only 2, and it would be good for her to practice her communication skills in Europe. Selling the condo, which still had a mortgage, was the only option. If we left it as it was, Catherine would have to cover the mortgage. Considering she's on a fixed income, she doesn't have that kind of money. Given her future prospects, someone should be around to assist her. Despite our efforts, Catherine was adamant about not moving into a facility, so we had to forcefully place her in one. I'm sorry, but I've got to head back to Europe. Could you handle any procedures required here? Bob asked before heading back. With help from those around me, I managed to finalize Catherine's admission into the facility. The facility staff keep me updated on Catherine's condition, but it seems she's not doing well. It would be one thing if she were just down, but apparently she's been giving people there a hard time. Before heading to Europe, I visited her to see how she was doing. But she lashed out at me, asking, "What's the big idea? Why have you locked me up in this place?" She vented her frustrations on the staff, complaining about the food, the beds, and the other residents. "I'm going to lose my mind in here," she shouted. When I apologized to the staff, they were very understanding. "It's all good," one of them assured me. We see this kind of behavior often. Just leave it to us and we'll keep you in the loop. If anything comes up, we'll give you a ring, so don't worry. Despite all the harassment, I felt worried as I headed to Europe because we used to live together. Upon arriving in Paris, Bob met me at the airport and we headed to our rented apartment. They say rents in Paris are higher than in Texas, but Bob's company provides a housing allowance, so we were lucky to find a spacious and affordable place. The neighbors in our building are super friendly and kind, even though I don't speak French fluently. Yesterday, a neighbor shared some wine and cheese with me, and in return I gave them some mac and cheese. I'm gradually learning French along with my daughter, Lily. I know there's a limit to self-study, so I've also enrolled in a language school. There are many Americans there, and I've made some friends who, like me, are new to France. I'm really enjoying my life in Paris. Back in the States, I was always concerned about Catherine, which often prevented me from fully enjoying outings with friends. But here, I can indulge in leisurely lunches just the way I like. The only concern right now is Lily. She's still too young for kindergarten. Kids here usually start the year they turn 5, so I hope she picks up enough French by then. Fortunately, Lily seems to be catching on quickly. I'm thinking of getting a job once Lily starts preschool. Bob says he's okay with me staying at home, but living in Paris has made me want to explore more opportunities. Seeing how ambitious and confident people are here has ignited something within me. I've become friends with a waitress at a nearby cafe, and she hinted there might be a job for me there. That cafe is popular among both the American community and those learning English. There might be challenges ahead, but since coming to France, Bob and I have been communicating much better. I feel more confident in expressing my feelings, and I believe that no matter what happens, we'll face it as a family. Right now, I feel happier than I've ever been in my life.
In the lush heart of an upscale neighborhood stood the property that could change my life. The price tag alone, $1.5 million, screamed luxury, but as I walked through its opulent hallways beside my husband Nathan, a sense of unease gnawed at me. "Meredith, look at this place." Nathan's eyes sparkled with an almost childlike glee. "Imagine us here, hosting parties, living the dream." I tried to mirror his enthusiasm, but a voice inside me whispered caution. "It's stunning, Nathan, but the price. Can we really manage this, even with Dad's help?" Nathan laughed, his voice echoing in the grand foyer. "Your dad won't mind. He's got more than enough. This is our chance, Meredith. Our future." His words felt like a mask slipping, revealing a glimmer of greed I hadn't seen before. We continued the tour in silence until we reached the garden. The real estate agent, a sharply dressed man named Mr. Collins, excused himself to take a call. "Go on out, Nathan. I'll catch up," I said, needing a moment alone. Nathan nodded and stepped outside. That's when Mr. Collins returned, his face unusually somber. "Mrs. Thompson, I need a word, in private," his tone urgent. Puzzled, I followed him into a small study. He closed the door with a definitive click and turned to face me. "Mrs. Thompson, what I'm about to say must stay between us. Your husband, Nathan, he's involved in something illegal." My heart skipped a beat. "What? That's impossible. Nathan's a good man." Mr. Collins sighed, his eyes holding a gravity I hadn't noticed before. I have friends in law enforcement. They've been tracking a drug ring and Nathan's name came up. I can't divulge more, but you should know. I felt my world tilt. Nathan involved in drugs? It couldn't be. Yet. Hadn't I sensed something off? You need to leave him, Mrs. Thompson, for your safety, Mr. Collins added. A bitter laugh escaped me. You expect me to end my marriage based on this? Mr. Collins's gaze was steady. I understand this is hard to accept. Just be careful. Consider what I've said. I left the room in a daze, the lavish walls of the house now feeling like a gilded cage. Outside, Nathan was admiring the garden, oblivious to the storm raging in my mind. Everything okay, honey? He asked, wrapping an arm around my waist. Yeah, just a bit overwhelmed by all this, I lied, forcing a smile. As we drove home, Nathan chattered about the house, our future, his dreams, but my thoughts were a whirlwind of doubt and fear. Was the man I married not who I thought he was? The words of Mr. Collins echoed in my mind, a sinister undercurrent to Nathan's enthusiastic plans. That night, as Nathan slept beside me, his face peaceful in the moonlight, I made a decision. I needed the truth. And if Nathan was the man Mr. Collins claimed he was, then I would make him pay. For my heart, for my trust, for everything. Revenge, a word I never thought would belong to me, settled in my heart. Nathan had chosen his path. Now it was time to choose mine. Months before the property viewing, life with Nathan seemed almost idyllic. We were the couple our friends envied, always laughing, always together. But as I lay awake that night, the past replayed in my mind, revealing cracks I had chosen to ignore. Meredith, I'll be out late tonight. Drinks with the guys, Nathan had said one evening, his tone casual. I remembered nodding, a smile fixed on my face. Sure, have fun. Just don't stay out too late. As I thought back, I realized these late nights had become more frequent. Nathan, once eager to spend every moment with me, now seemed to find any excuse to be away. I had dismissed it as pre-marriage jitters, the last hurrahs of bachelorhood. But now, doubt crept in like a shadow. The following morning, I decided to confront Nathan. Over breakfast, I broached the subject. Nathan, we need to talk. You've been out a lot lately? Is everything okay? He looked up from his coffee, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. It's nothing, Meredith. Just enjoying my freedom while I can. You know, before the ball and chain. His words stung, and I pushed back my chair, standing up. Is that how you see our marriage? A ball and chain? Nathan's expression softened, and he reached for my hand. I didn't mean it like that, Meredith. I love you. I'm just getting it all out of my system. I wanted to believe him, to return to the blissful ignorance I had basked in. But the seed of doubt Mr. Collins planted refused to be ignored. That afternoon, I called my best friend Lisa, seeking a sounding board. Lisa, do you think I'm overreacting? Nathan's been so distant lately. Lisa's voice was hesitant. Meredith, you know I love you both, but I've seen Nathan out. He's not always with the guys. Her words were a punch to my gut. What do you mean? He's been seen around town with some unsavory characters. I didn't want to say anything, but I felt a chill run down my spine. Nathan's late nights, his evasive answers, and now Mr. Collins's warning, it all began to form a sinister picture. Over the next few days, I observed Nathan. His phone, once left carelessly around the house, was now always on him, buzzing with constant messages. His once warm demeanor towards me cooled, replaced by a detached politeness. One evening, as Nathan prepared for another night out, I confronted him again. Nathan, who are you meeting tonight? You're always so secretive. He paused, his back to me. Just some old friends. You wouldn't know them. The lie was evident, and I felt a surge of anger. Nathan, I'm your wife. If there's something going on, you can tell me. He turned, his eyes hard. There's nothing to tell, Meredith. Just drop it. As he left, slamming the door behind him, I felt a resolve harden within me. Nathan was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. No more excuses, no more lies. I was done playing the dutiful, oblivious wife. That night, as I sat alone in our cold, silent house, I knew one thing for certain. The man I married was a stranger, and I was going to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The ensuing days felt like walking through a thick fog. Each smile Nathan flashed, every affectionate gesture now seemed tainted with duplicity. I watched him, the man I had pledged my life to, with a skeptic's eye, searching for the truth behind his mask. One evening, as we sat in our living room surrounded by real estate brochures, Nathan's true nature began to emerge more clearly. "Meredith, look at this one," he said, pointing to a brochure featuring a mansion that screamed opulence. "Your dad won't mind footing the bill for this, right?" I felt a pang of disgust at his casual expectation of my father's wealth. "Nathan, we need to be realistic. We can't exploit my father's generosity." He laughed, a sound that once warmed my heart, now chilling it. "Come on, Meredith. Your dad's loaded. He'd want his little girl to live in luxury." I stared at him, the man I thought I knew, now a stranger driven by greed. "My father's money isn't a ticket to your lavish fantasies, Nathan." His face darkened, and for a moment I saw the man Mr. Collins had warned me about. "So what? You're choosing your dad over me?" I stood up, my hands trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "This isn't about choosing sides. It's about respect and responsibility, something you seem to have forgotten." Nathan stood as well, his eyes flashing with something akin to fury. "You know what, Meredith? Maybe you're the one who's forgotten what this marriage is about." I felt a cold resolve settle over me. "And what is that, Nathan? Using me for my father's money?" He didn't respond, turning away with a dismissive wave of his hand. That night, I lay in bed, the space between us wider than the physical distance. My mind was made up. I needed to protect myself and my family from this man who had become an embodiment of betrayal. The following day, I made a call to a private investigator. If Nathan wouldn't give me the truth, I would find it myself. I recounted Nathan's late nights, his sudden interest in expensive properties, and Mr. Collins's alarming revelation. "I need to know what he's hiding," I told the investigator. "I need evidence." As I set the plan in motion, a part of me mourned the loss of the love I once felt, but that grief was overshadowed by a burning desire for justice. Nathan had made his choice, and now I was making mine. Weeks passed, and the investigator provided me with updates. Nathan's business meetings were nothing more than rendezvous with known criminals. The late nights were not spent with friends, but in shady dealings. Each report was a nail in the coffin of our marriage. I confronted Nathan one last time, armed with the evidence. "I know about your dealings, Nathan. I know about the people you've been meeting." His reaction was not of remorse, but of rage. "You had me followed? You spied on me?" "Yes, because you left me no choice," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I trusted you, Nathan, and you betrayed me." He scoffed, turning away. "You're just like everyone else. You don't understand what it takes to make it in this world." As he left the room, I knew there was no turning back. I had seen the real Nathan, a man consumed by greed and deceit, and I would not let him destroy me. I would fight back with every resource at my disposal. Nathan would learn that betrayal comes at a price, and I would be the one to collect it. The day of the property viewing loomed like a dark cloud. I knew it was more than just looking at houses. It was a confrontation with the truth about Nathan. As we drove in silence, my mind raced with the reports from the private investigator and the images of Nathan's secret life. The man next to me was a stranger, his charming facade now a grotesque mask. Upon arriving, the property's grandeur was overshadowed by the weight of my impending revelation. Nathan seemed oblivious, lost in visions of a life built on lies and deceit. The real estate agent, Mr. Collins, greeted us with a professionalism that felt cold. His eyes met mine, a silent acknowledgement of the storm brewing beneath the surface. As we toured the lavish rooms, Nathan's excitement was palpable. "Imagine the parties we could have here, Meredith. This is the life we deserve." His words echoed hollowly in my ears. "Deserve? Based on what, Nathan? Your lies? Your illegal activities?" He stopped, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "What are you talking about?" "I know everything, Nathan. The late nights, the criminals, the drugs. You've been living a double life." His facade cracked, revealing a glimpse of the man he truly was. "You've been snooping around, spying on me?" "Yes, because I needed to know the truth," I said, my voice unwavering. Nathan's expression hardened. "You think you're better than me, Meredith? You think you're above it all with your perfect life and your rich daddy?" The accusation stung, but I stood my ground. "This isn't about me, Nathan. This is about you and the choices you've made." He scoffed, turning away. "You don't understand anything." As he stormed off, Mr. Collins approached me, his expression grave. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Mrs. Thompson. But you needed to know the truth. I nodded. My resolve strengthened. Thank you, Mr. Collins. I needed to see it for myself. Leaving the property, I knew what I had to do. Nathan's betrayal couldn't go unpunished. The man I loved was gone, replaced by a criminal who used me as a stepping stone for his ambitions. That evening, I sat alone in our now tainted home, planning my next move. Nathan's world would come crashing down, and I would be the one to pull the lever. He would pay for his deceit, not just legally, but personally. I would ensure that his fall from grace was as steep as the pedestal he had placed himself upon. The game had changed, and I was no longer a pawn in Nathan's twisted world. I was now the player, and it was my turn to make a move. The next few days were a blur of cold determination. My plan for retribution against Nathan took shape, each step meticulously crafted. I reached out to Mr. Collins, seeking more information and solidifying my resolve. We met in a discreet cafe, the buzz of the city a stark contrast to our somber conversation. "Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Collins began, his voice low, "I've gathered more evidence. It's worse than we thought." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos and documents, undeniable proof of Nathan's entanglement in criminal activities. My hands trembled as I leafed through the evidence. How could he be so reckless? "It's greed, Mrs. Thompson. It blinds people," Mr. Collins replied. I looked up, my eyes burning with a mix of fury and sorrow. "I want to bring him down. He can't get away with this." Collins nodded. "I understand. You have my full support." The following day, I confronted Nathan. He returned home, his usual arrogance on display. I was waiting, the folder of evidence in hand. "Nathan, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady. He smirked, unaware of the storm about to break. "What now, Meredith? More accusations?" I threw the folder on the table. "No, not accusations. Proof." His smirk vanished as he flipped through the documents. "Where did you get this? That's not important. What matters is that your lies are over," I said. Nathan's face contorted with rage. "You think you can corner me like this? You're nothing without me, Meredith." His words were like venom, but I stood unshaken. "I was everything before you, and I'll be everything after you're gone. Your time is up, Nathan." He lunged at me, but I was ready. Stepping aside, I let his momentum carry him forward, crashing into the furniture. "Stay away from me," I warned, my heart pounding. Nathan picked himself up, his eyes wild. "You'll pay for this, Meredith. You think you've won? This is far from over." But I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew his world was crumbling. "I'm going to the authorities," I declared. "You're going to face the consequences of your actions." As he stormed out, I knew the battle was just beginning. But I was prepared. Nathan had underestimated me, and that was his biggest mistake. My heart ached with the betrayal and loss, but it was overshadowed by a burning desire for justice. Nathan's fall from grace would be a spectacle, and I would be the architect of his demise. This was more than revenge. It was retribution for every lie, every deceitful smile, every moment he thought he could use me and walk away unscathed. The game of deception was over, and I was writing the final act. Nathan would learn that betrayal comes with a price, and I was here to collect. The day of reckoning arrived with a heavy air. I stood in the living room, the evidence of Nathan's betrayal neatly compiled on the coffee table, waiting for him to return. My heart raced with a mix of fear and anticipation. Today, Nathan's charade would end. The sound of the door opening sent a shiver down my spine. Nathan walked in, his usual confident stride faltering as he saw the determined look in my eyes. "Meredith, what's this about?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure. "It's about the truth, Nathan," I replied, my voice unwavering. "The truth about who you really are." He scoffed, attempting to deflect. "You're being dramatic. Let's just talk this out." I pushed the folder towards him. "Talk? Like how you talked your way into illegal dealings? Or how you talked about love while betraying everything we stood for?" Nathan's facade began to crumble, his eyes betraying a flicker of panic. "Meredith, you don't understand. I did this for us, for our future." "By destroying it?" I countered sharply. "You did this for yourself, Nathan. Your greed, your lies, you've ruined everything." He lunged towards me, his face contorted with rage. "You think you can judge me? You, with your perfect life and your daddy's money?" I stepped back, my resolve hardening. "This isn't about me, Nathan. It's about your crimes, your choices, and now you're going to face the consequences." Nathan's anger turned to desperation. "Meredith, Please. We can fix this. I can fix this. But it was too late. There's nothing left to fix, Nathan. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. With a trembling hand, I dialed the number I had prepared. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air, and police officers arrived at our door. Nathan's face drained of color as he realized the gravity of the situation. You called the police? Yes, Nathan. It's over, I said, a mix of relief and sorrow washing over me. As the officers handcuffed him, Nathan turned to me, his eyes filled with a toxic combination of anger and disbelief. You'll regret this, Meredith. You've just made the biggest mistake of your life. But I stood firm, watching as he was led away. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by a stranger whose deceit and greed had consumed him. In the silence that followed, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had done what was necessary, not just for me, but for the justice that Nathan had so callously disregarded. The path ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it. Nathan's betrayal had shattered my trust, but it had also revealed a strength in me I never knew I had. As I looked around the empty house, I realized that this was not an end but a beginning of a new chapter, one where I was no longer a victim of deceit but a survivor, ready to rebuild my life on my own terms. The days following Nathan's arrest were a whirlwind of emotions and legal proceedings. Sitting in the courtroom, watching the man I once loved now reduced to a criminal defendant, I felt a complex mix of triumph and heartache. As the judge delivered the verdict, guilty on multiple counts, Nathan's face was a mask of defeat. He turned to look at me, his eyes a mix of anger and despair. In that moment, I saw the remnants of the man I had married, buried under layers of greed and deception. Outside the courtroom, the press swarmed, eager for a statement. I faced them, my voice steady. Justice has been served today. It's a sad day when someone you trusted betrays not just you, but the law. The following weeks were a time of reflection. I realized that my marriage to Nathan had been built on a foundation of lies. But I also recognized the strength and resilience I had found within myself. I decided to start anew, leaving behind the tainted memories of our shared home. Selling the property, I moved into a smaller, cozier place, one that represented my new beginning. One day, while settling into my new life, I received a call. It was Nathan's parents. They wanted to meet, to apologize for their son's actions. We met at a quiet cafe, and the remorse in their eyes was genuine. Meredith, we're so sorry for what Nathan did to you, his mother said, her voice quivering. I nodded, acknowledging their pain. Thank you, but Nathan's choices were his own. You don't need to bear his guilt. His father, a stoic man, handed me an envelope. We know it can't undo the harm, but please accept this as a token of our apology. I opened the envelope to find a substantial check. I hesitated, then pushed it back. I appreciate the gesture, but I cannot accept this. Nathan's actions are not your responsibility. Their gratitude was evident, and we parted ways with a mutual understanding and respect. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. The experience with Nathan had changed me, but it had also opened my eyes to my own strength and the importance of trust and integrity. One day, I received news that Nathan had been released on parole. A part of me tensed at the thought of facing him again, but I realized that he no longer had power over me. I had moved on, leaving the shadows of our past behind. I learned that Nathan had started working, trying to rebuild his life. Whether he had truly changed, I didn't know, but it was no longer my concern. My journey had taught me that some people come into our lives as lessons, and Nathan had been my harshest one. As I walked through the park, the sun setting in a brilliant array of colors, I felt a sense of peace. The chapter of my life with Nathan was closed, but my story was far from over. In the end, I had not just survived, I had thrived. And as I looked towards the future, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them with a heart that was stronger, wiser, and more open than ever before.